everybody. Welcome to City Girls Pod, and we're back after our Christmas hiatus. And hopefully, everybody had a good time listening to our recap of the first Sex and the City movie with Greg McBride as part of our New Year's special. That was really fun. And now we're here to talk about Sex and the City too. Happy New
Yeah,
Year.
it was so great getting to chat with Greg and Sex and the City one, although, it does have its things. It was an enjoyable movie. I've been excited though to dive into this one with you, Rachel,
Yeah.
because there's just so much to say.
Yeah, sometimes it is fun to talk about bad movies in a podcast. That actually can be some of my
Yeah.
uh favorite episodes just because it's interesting why something doesn't work sometimes just as much as it's interesting why something does work.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree, especially when it's laughably bad rather than boring bad.
Yeah. So how was your holidays? Did you have a good holidays, Jax?
It was great. It was very chill. I got to go home to see my family in Pennsylvania for a few days, and then I was in the city kind of just hanging out and hanging with my cat. How about you, Rachel?
Yeah, it was good. I still feel like I'm recovering
Yeah.
from it was intense. I figured out we did 36 interviews just in the holiday season.
That's
Yeah,
so many.
so many. Yeah,
So
all
many
edited by
interviews.
me, all prepared by me. Like I have to get ready for it. And there was one interview I didn't do, but everything else I did.
What would you say is the average you're sleeping a night?
Not much. But that's partly because I'm insomniac and I
Yeah, I
struggle.
was gonna. Perfect job for you.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, it was a lot of work. Plus, is because the thing is, it's not for me during the holidays. Not only am I watching all these Christmas movies because I watched 128 to prepare to talk about them too, but also I have to watch all the Oscar screeners because we vote for Utah Film Critics Association and the other film groups I'm in. We vote for our favorites and we have our awards. Uh, that one was Utah Film Critics. I had to have everything watched by the 13th for nominations. And then we did our award on the 17th. So it's like I have to watch all these Oscar screeners and these Hallmark movies. It's just a weird life that I lead.
Yeah, the juxtaposition and also the fact that the busiest seasons fall at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. So anyway, I'm glad to get back to the normal schedule and to be talking some Sex and the City.
You're
And
It's like Oscar caliber movie, right? Sex and the
oh
City 2.
yeah. I think so. Yeah, so Sex and the City 2, it was released in 2010, and I think that's actually part of the problem is that uh we had the housing crisis in 2008, the where the stock market uh was hit by the high rate loans that they were doing. And so that was when the first movie came out. Now it's 2 years more into the recession, and a lot of the things that maybe might seem charming when the first movie even came out, now it just felt really sour to people. If you want to have a laugh, Mark Kermode on he's a UK critic. His rant about Sex and the City 2 is pretty funny. You check it out
We'll
on
have to check that out.
yeah,
Absolutely.
on YouTube. But yeah, it really I think it got a bunch of Razzies and it just wasn't received well, this movie. And I think they made a lot of mistakes. I don't know what quite they were thinking, but uh they the first part is kind of them the beginning is probably better than the last 45 minutes when they're they've got the wedding and they're sort of seeing where their life is and what's going on, but once they go off to Abu Dhabi it's rough.
Well, to be perfectly honest, Rachel, I had seen this before and it's notoriously horrible. And I remember being like, oh, this is so problematic. But I will say that watching it now, I was surprised that I did actually enjoy the first, half hour when they were going to the wedding, when Liza Minnelli's singing.
Yeah.
There were things I liked about the first part, but I think I was so horrified by the rest of it that I had blocked out the good things.
Yeah, I think that that's true. Also, this is so weird because this is not currently on HBO Max. It's the only Sex and the City thing. But I started to watch it on Saturday on Christmas Eve on Netflix, and then I went to start watching it again the next day, and it was gone off Netflix. So it's currently
Right.
yeah, so it's currently not on any streaming service.
That's so funny because I texted you, I thought I watched it on HBO Max, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know where I watched it then because I watched
Yeah.
it Friday.
Yeah, I don't know. So I had to rent it.
Oh,
Maybe I just got unlucky. I don't know, but to finish
you
watching
had to
it.
pay to watch this.
Yeah. So that's weird. Also, this movie does not need to be 2 hours and 25 minutes. Like, why on earth? They should
It
just,
was so overstuffed with things. It's like, and just so cringe after cringe
yeah.
after cringe.
Yeah. And so we start out with, get a little backstory of the girls, which was interesting. I'm very curious if they will hold to this as canon in the Carrie Diaries.
Yes, I was wondering the same thing, Rachel, because actually I thought this opening was really adorable. I thought it was cute.
Because they say that she arrived in New York in June 11th, 1986, and then she met Charlotte the next year, and she met Miranda in 1989. So, and she met Samantha when she was bartending at CBGB's.
Which it was interesting to picture Carrie as a bartender.
I thought it was Samantha who was the bartender.
Oh, maybe that's why I was like, oh, that makes much more sense. I was like, what was Carrie? But also, like, what was Samantha doing bartending? Also,
Yeah, maybe. I'd have to listen to it again.
No, I think you're right. That makes more sense.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, I think the wedding is fun, but I don't really like that they picked Stanford and Anthony because they really did hate each other. And they say that they said, oh, they hated each other, but they're like the last gay men left. So they were like, let's get married. And I'm like, what?
I think that would have been a more interesting thing is if they just realized that they became friends and liked each other. Because they didn't have that will they, won't they, like, oh, we hate each other. Like, it wasn't that hate to lovers thing. It was like, they're not attracted to each other and they didn't like each other. It seemed like. So I think I would have liked to have seen them reconcile and become besties, but I don't think they just needed to marry them off with each other.
Yeah, it was weird. I didn't like that. And then they have the wedding. It is very over the top. They have this gay men's chorus there singing if ever I would leave you and other Broadway songs. And they also say so supposedly they're getting married, but Anthony's allowed to cheat from the beginning, which just felt like this is a very happy ending for Stanford.
Well, actually, so I thought this was interesting, and I think something that feels very freeing about queer relationships is that you really get to set the rules in a way that's not like sort of governed by our patriarchal standards. I mean, any relationship can set the rules, but I think that some people are very happy in open relationships and it doesn't work for other people. But it didn't seem like Stanford was really too excited.
That's the thing. Yeah. See, I agree with what you're saying, but it didn't seem like Stanford was in on it was for that. And so he seemed awkward. And I don't know. That was the miss for me in the wedding was why pick Anthony? Why not have somebody else? Like, why not have him marry the actor guy that he was dating?
You mean the hot actor guy?
Right.
Well, which is all, yeah, it's a very interesting thing. I thought that line was kind of cute and funny though, when he's like, oh, he's only allowed to only in the states that their marriage isn't legal, because at the time the gay marriage was only legal in, I guess it was.
Yeah, I forget where what the timeline was like, because obviously
Yeah.
there was Proposition 8 in 2008 in California, but I'm not sure where, when it all broke down.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you that it doesn't seem like Stanford's too thrilled about that. And I was also wondering if maybe Anthony, it's like the idea of being able to be with other people, but less about actually wanting to. Because especially they never thought they'd be able to get married, especially when they grew up, it was never a thing that they thought. So yeah, I thought that was interesting though. I thought the wedding was fun in that like Carrie looks adorable in her little tux. We get to see Liza Minnelli rocking it. We get to see all the girls and their dates at the wedding. Like it was quite an extravagant affair.
And I have to say, Steve looked good. I've always liked Steve, but I thought he looked really good. And they were like clearly in love with each other, which was so refreshing to see. I'm like, can I leave them there at that
Rachel,
spot?
I really want you to find your Steve, because I see you with like a Steve type.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
I mean, like with a Steve type, let me be very clear, a Steve type now, not what they turned Steve into.
Yeah.
Like you need someone that's cooler than that.
Yeah.
Old Steve.
Yes.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
And so there's Anthony's brother Nicky at the wedding that hits it off with Samantha. Let's talk about Samantha. So in this movie, there's a term called flanderizing. Have you heard that term?
Yeah.
Okay. So flanderizing is from Flanders on Simpsons, where a character that originally maybe had some nuance is just sort of a one-note character that all it is like, in his case, religion. He's a religious guy. Mm-hmm. That's it. And I feel like that's what they've done with Samantha's character in this movie. Like, she is just only about sex all the time. That's all she cares about. And her hot flashes, like, that is it. And in the show, she remember, we talked a bunch of times that she was actually quite picky, that and she would have relationships, whether it was with Richard or Smith or whatever, and so there was something kind of like, you never knew what to expect with Samantha, if she was going to be interested in a guy or not interested, or like, obviously she was a very sexual woman always, but that wasn't her only trait.
Yeah, that episode of Sex and the City where she is at the nightclub with Smith and she ends up going off with Richard, and then she comes down in the elevator and she's crying and Smith hugs her. I was like, oh, we're really seeing what made Samantha who she is. And I feel like the writers, Kim Cattrall is a fabulous actor. The writers could have taken her in a different direction and could have maybe had them experiment with an open relationship, or see what it was like if she was committed to someone long-term. Like, there are lots of directions that could have gone, But right now it's just sex and menopause, but even just the menopause is feeding into the sex thing. So you're right. It's very sad to see. And I really respect her as an actor for being like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Because I think even if there wasn't the personal issues, I don't blame her for not coming back, because they just kind of ruined her character. I mean, she was somebody, especially in the Abu Dhabi scenes where she's so clueless to the world around her. She was a PR person. She's somebody who is very aware of appearances and how things look, and kind of fitting in and everything like that. So she would know kind of how to behave.
That's a really good point, Rachel. And it's like she's saying things that are so over the top offensive that it doesn't make sense for her as a career woman to be saying these things and doing these things. It's so genuinely sad and upsetting that, like you said, even if there was no beef between her and Sarah Jessica Parker, I can absolutely see why you would say I'm not coming back for this.
Yeah. I did think it was funny at the wedding when they sang Sunrise Sunset. That made me laugh. I thought that was funny. But I didn't really, I thought the Liza was great, but her singing Single Ladies doesn't really make any sense. I mean, this is a wedding of two guys. Why are we singing Single Ladies?
I'll tell you why, Rachel. They just decided to stuff every random thing in that they could. Didn't matter if it made sense. They were like, oh, this will like be a good standalone scene. It was like, well, we'll get to it, but I'm woman, hear me roar. Like it was like,
oh yeah,
cringe. So no, they were looking for things to like put in the trailer, and it didn't make a lick of sense.
Yeah, and that was a very, let's see, that came out in 2008, I think. So that was a very like relevant kind of thing. And it just feels cringe now.
Yep.
Yeah. Have you ever seen that Twitter account where it's, what is it? It's Liza Minnelli has outlived, and each day they post something that it's like, I don't know, it's funny. There's something that Liza Minnelli has outlived.
Oh my gosh, no, but I have to go.
We have this kind of back and forth about with Big and Carrie. And if you listen to that Mark Kermode rant, one of his sticking points is the fact that they just have like a bonus apartment for fun. Like, what? I mean, and they did carry that into and just like that, she still had the bonus apartment.
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, it's an interesting thing because they are very wealthy people, and I do love the idea that Carrie has this like escape and like her old apartment is still there, because it's very like it feels very like Sex in the City, like early days, that she can go there and write and do her thing. And a lot of people with that much money would have like multiple homes, so that doesn't bother me as much. But I understand, especially like we're talking about like during the recession, watching this, you're like, okay,
yeah, just
always so many homeless people also, so it's like,
yeah, and they're just like, it's hard to sell. It's not that hard to sell. I mean, what? Like, sure, yeah, moving's hard, but it's not, because not only, you think about it, not only is she paying the mortgage or rent or whatever, but she has to pay for utilities. She has to, all that stuff has to be kept up. So it's not like it's just sort of there.
Something that was always and continues to be upsetting to me, like in the last apartment building that I lived in, there were 9 units. And so much of the time people were like at their other homes. And I would just think, oh my goodness, these apartments are sitting empty. And I thought of all the times when I was like desperate for a place to live and like living somewhere that wasn't that great. And I'm like, can you imagine like even just subletting your place? Like whenever we go away, I mean, now we have the cat, but we would always have someone stay in our apartment because it's like if anyone needs somewhere to crash, like I can't stand the thought of places sitting empty, especially in New York.
Well, especially now when you've got Airbnb and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They didn't have that in 2010, but you still had subletting and things. And so yeah, that really, really rang false. And just the fact that they just treat it as something ordinary. I think that that's part of the problem with this movie is that they don't acknowledge their privilege enough, which is frustrating. And also Carrie is very frustrating in this movie. Like her getting upset with Big because he wants to watch some television at night, like, and that she somehow thinks that a piece of jewelry would be better than this, like, what is basically a thoughtful gift. Like they enjoyed watching the movie on the night, and so he gets a television for her, and she's like so offended that he would want to watch television. I mean, what man, especially man, doesn't enjoy watching television at night? Like even my dad watches sports and stuff. Like,
well, I mean, I think you and I are like two people that this just does not land with, because I have a 1-bedroom apartment and there are 3 TVs.
Right.
Like I TV in the living room, bedroom, and TV in the bathroom. And like I love TV. So to me, okay, what we're supposed to believe about this is that she's saying it's like killing romance and it's killing sex. And I'm like, well, it's just like creating a different kind of intimacy. Like you said, Rachel, it wasn't actually a mindless gift. He didn't get her a vacuum cleaner or something.
Yeah.
Like, actually, a vacuum cleaner can be a great gift for some people, but I'm saying for Carrie, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But he thought, like you said, Rachel, we enjoyed watching this. It was a lovely thing we did together. What's wrong with having a TV in the bedroom that was actually, by the way, the TV was able to be hidden during the day?
Right. Yeah. It was ridiculous. It just made her super unlikable. Pretty much like I've never been so on Team Big than in this movie.
Well, good point. And yes, you know what I thought was interesting too, because we all go through like phases in our lives with our relationships, and I know I'm someone who's been stuck in opinions and thoughts that are probably annoying to other people. But I thought the maddening thing about Carrie with this is she's saying something like, okay, we don't have enough of like passion, romance, and Big won't go out. Then they go out and he's having a lovely conversation with Penelope Cruz. Right. And Carrie's like mad annoyed about that. And I thought an interesting thing with that, with her being like, oh, I saw you talking to her and it kind of got my fire going. I like being a little jealous. But instead she was just annoyed. So it's like everything he did was wrong, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And he's absolutely right about like, hey, I came to the event. I did what you wanted me to do. Now, why can't I just relax in my home?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've never been so Team Big than in this movie. And you have basically Big and Carrie at this house or wherever they're staying, and you have Nikki and Samantha being very loud, and you have the babies Rose and Lily being very loud, and so they figure which is worse, the baby crying or the loud sex.
Which I did laugh at the line when she's like, oh, it's Samantha because the baby will tire out.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I have a question for you, Rachel, because it was a tiny scene, but it annoyed me so much. The scene with Kelly O'Hara, who is a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
She's telling Carrie how they're just alike and all these things. And the reaction that she has when Carrie says she's not having kids is just totally unbelievable. Like, of course she was directed to do that. And the thing is, I understand, like, I'm someone who's not planning on having children And I'm not saying that you don't sometimes get reactions that are like, oh, okay. But the way she went from being so warm to her to being like shut down rather than even like inquisitive or like, oh, really? You're not having kids? I don't blame Kelly O'Hara because she's phenomenal and clearly she did what they directed her to do. But I was like, this just is, it's so painting it with such in broad strokes. I hated it.
Yeah. Well, and like, I totally mean this like in a complimentary way, but like, I think maybe it's more surprising for someone like yourself who's so outwardly warm and nurturing. And it just, that it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. Whereas like someone like Carrie, is it really that big of a surprise that she has not going to have children?
Yeah, thank you, by the way, for that. And yeah, I agree. It's like, do we ever think Carrie Bradshaw was like, I want to be a mom?
Yeah. No, I would never, like, that would not be the first thing that I think of like, oh, Carrie Bradshaw is, especially considering she's like famous for being writing this single column, that would be like the first thing I think of. Oh, she's going to have children. I don't know. You just wouldn't. So yeah, that was a really awkward scene. And it's kind of makes Carrie sort of think of, should they have children? And Big says, well, because she goes away to her apartment for 2 days, and Big basically says like, we can make our own rules, and so maybe that's a good idea. I can do all the stuff that annoys you during those 2 days. You can get do all the things you like, and then we come back together, and it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks of that idea. And I don't know. I mean, I think he has a point.
Yeah, so I do think he has a point. I think, as you were saying earlier, Rachel, like they're coming from a great position of privilege. I think you can find time for yourself, whether it's, going to a coffee shop or, whatever it is, going for a walk by yourself. You can have very independent relationships if you choose to. But yeah, I wasn't alarmed by what he did. It made me sad though when he was like, I can do all the things that annoy you, and it's like, oh
yeah, this marriage was.
Hello. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Katie, and we have a podcast called
One Kiss Means Forever. Do you love made-for-TV rom-coms?
Are you obsessed with Hallmark and all the Hallmark-inspired copycats that have come out on other platforms like Netflix?
And, while being obsessed, do you know that these are not what one might call quality films?
If so, come listen to our podcast. Each episode, we discuss one movie that did not have a theatrical release and always ends in a happily ever after.
And how do we know it will end in a happily ever after?
Because one kiss means forever, of course.
So join us as we deep dive into each movie for about 45 minutes.
Episodes drop every other Thursday, except during the very elongated Hallmark Christmas season when we join the Christmas craze and go weekly for about 2.5 months. Bye!
And yeah, we have the big premiere, and Carrie gives, they have their anniversary, and Carrie gives a big Rolex, which was fine, but it's just, this movie is just so materialistic. Like everything is weighed by some type of money or transaction. Whereas like in the original show, like, yeah, of course it was about shoes and things like that, but it was also about the relationship of these 4 women and intangibles like that were important. And like Carrie wasn't completely devoid of any kind of budgeting, like remember when she has to ask Miranda and Charlotte for money for her apartment. So there was like some sense of finances. This is just, now it's like, it really is kind of like a fantasy, as if they're royalty.
Yes, that's exactly right, Rachel. Like it's as if they're royalty, and like you can, that's fine. But I think that's something I enjoyed about the series was that yes, they lived in New York, and it would take like an extravagant amount of money for them to live the way they did. However, it wasn't like they were living in that world, like that they were so rich. And even like Miranda moving to Brooklyn and, Carrie having all the credit card trouble, there were at least kind of thoughts and discussions around money rather than them just floating through like this.
Yeah. Well, we also have Miranda hates her job, and she has this the senior partner who is calling her at all hours, texting her at all hours. She's missing all this time with Brady, missing the science project. And I do kind of relate to all of that. I just wish that it had been handled in, I don't know, just felt like instead of it being some, because I love an epic quit. There's nothing I love more in a story. Like I love that. Like screw you all, I'm leaving. I love that. But because they never really showed any kind of after effects of them dealing with losing the salary or anything, that it did feel kind of entitled.
Yeah.
When it should have been empowering.
And we didn't actually get to see the quit.
Yeah, like, that's true. That's true.
We got to see her show up. And when she's like, I made it, I never make it, that was sweet. Also want to give a shout out to one of my Hallmark favorites, Neil Bledsoe has a little cameo there. He plays the partner that yeah, and actually like he only has a little like 2 lines, but what was really cool is that I actually you can see he's like a really good actor because he's like, oh, this was Miranda's case. And you could tell he's a good guy too. Yeah. Like he's playing, and I was like, okay, Neil Bledsoe, I see you. I like that.
Yeah. So I don't know. That wasn't as empowering as well done as it should have been. And I as a Charlotte, I have to say she is just not great in this movie. I mean, the idea that she'd be upset about that, first of all, that she's wearing a white vintage Valentino skirt while making these bright red cupcakes with her children just makes no sense. And that she gets mad at Lily. And I mean, that is something that could definitely be cleaned off, whether dry cleaning or regular cleaning, depending on the clothing. And, it's like, I get it. Like, being a mom is hard, period. But it's hard to feel sorry for her when she has full-time nanny, 2 children, and no other job.
I thought, the thing is, I did think that Kristen Davis did a great job of really digging into some of the stuff here, especially a little bit later on. There's a great conversation with Cynthia Nixon with Miranda. But I totally agree with you about like the vintage Valentino skirt and all that stuff, because I have worked for and have interacted with plenty of wealthy women and who were, stay-at-home moms or moms in New York City. And they would never wear that to make stuff. Would they wear like expensive like workout gear?
Yeah, like yoga
maybe
pants
they would have gotten a blowout. Exactly. Like they would still be like dressed up and looking cute and like doing a thing, but like you said, like yoga pants and like a nice top and maybe still rocking the hair and stuff, but they would not be wearing white vintage pants while they're in the kitchen.
Yeah, skirt. It makes no sense. And it just made her again seem kind of entitled, and it's kind of interesting that I felt sort of surprised by how likable Charlotte was in And Just Like That, and how she was the best character, because I think the last time we saw her was in this. And I mean, she was kind of judgy on this show of people and how they live their life, and she's definitely judgy of Carrie and Big, and this idea of the 2 nights away she's not a fan of, and she does kind of admit that towards the end. And I do agree that conversation between her and Miranda is good at the end, where they talk about like, how do people do it without help. it's a little condescending, but like there's some truth there. But uh and I think when she gets upset and is in the pantry, like it is a truthful moment. It's all surrounded by this materialism, and you kind of have the bad taste in your mouth of her getting upset at Lily for doing something totally normal.
Yeah, it's very tricky because she does manage to really, we believe her and we believe that that character is going through something really difficult. And like you said, it's a truthful moment, but it's all the stuff it's wrapped up in that makes it a little difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also really was annoyed by how judgy they all were of Erin, the nanny.
Oh, I mean, I love that character. Like, I love everything. Like one who cares that she doesn't wear a bra. Lots of women don't. She seems like she is excellent with the kids.
Yeah.
And just like a real support system for Charlotte also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's Samantha who's is the most judgmental of her just by her appearance. And you just think that these women would be a little bit more accepting of all different kinds of women.
Absolutely. And it's this whole thing that, I mean, I'm just like LOLing at that. You're like, oh, we're worried about the nanny with Harry. Number one, Harry would never do that.
Right.
Number two, as we learn, the nanny is a lesbian, but also I'm not believing that that woman would want to hook up with Harry either. Like, it just is so icky. Like, as someone who was a nanny for a long time, I remember one time someone I sat for briefly, like, was like, oh yeah, a couple of my friends were saying like I shouldn't hire like a young person to watch my kids because of my husband. And I remember her just telling me that was like, oh, like I don't think of your husband in that way. Your husband doesn't think of me in that way. It just felt so icky and cringe to even have that thought circulating around.
Yeah, like give the guys a little bit of credit. Yeah, I agree. And so yeah, Carrie is writing this book on marriage, which just feel like she's only been married for 2 years. She really at a spot to be writing a book of advice. I don't know. Seems a little premature.
Agreed. And something I actually did like about this, that because of the reviews, but then also because of what she realizes about how she doesn't really know a lot about what it's like to be married, there is this thing of like she was just skimming the surface.
Yeah.
Like kind of a fluff book about being married, when really it's like she is just learning what it is to be married, and hopefully she'll get to a deeper understanding of that.
Yeah. And so yeah, they go to the big premiere. Big doesn't want to, but they go, and Samantha is wearing the same dress as Miley Cyrus, and I feel like they didn't really milk that for the comedy that I was expecting. They were just kind of like hugging and like, oh great, we're in the same dress. Like I was expecting it to pay off a little bit more.
Yeah, it didn't get a great payoff. I didn't like how the woman in the store was like, oh, you're too old to wear that. Like, I just don't think that would happen. And also it's like, are we really going to play into this? Like, I don't know why we like play into this thing of like, oh, we're too old to this. You're not. It's fine.
And especially that dress. There was nothing about that seemed juvenile. Like there are some looks where I'm like, that feels like a junior's look.
Yes, yeah.
Why are you wearing that? You're grown up. So on Lifetime this season, there's a movie with Maria Menounos that I hated. It was terrible, and no offense to her, but it was obviously written for somebody who was like 20. She had this like gay roommate who was like her BFF, and I don't know, just everything about it. And Maria Menounos is 44 years old. And so seeing her, like they did all the stuff to make her seem younger. Like they put her in a ponytail, and she was always like, And
Oh,
it was not for me. It was called the Holiday Dating Guide. And so there are times when you're just like, you're not dressing your age. You look ridiculous.
and you're trying to do a thing.
Yeah. It makes you look older when
Yeah.
you are wearing clothes that are designed for younger, So anyway, it can be a thing, but it wasn't really done well. I mean, it just wasn't, there was so much. I thought for sure she was gonna like freak out or do something funny, but
No.
she didn't. I don't know. So that was weird. And you do have Tim Gunn there saying awkward times too.
Yeah.
So
That was funny.
yeah. And this is when the director invites Samantha to Dubai. And so she tells the girls and she says, "Oh, you're all coming," even though Charlotte's not sure about it. They all insist. And kind of gets to our second part of the movie, which the first part's not perfect, but the Abu Dhabi stuff, it was stupid. Like, well, yes, they would occasionally leave New York on the show, and they'd been to like Mexico and LA, and if you feel that they would go up to like the Poconos or things like that. But the they I don't know, like the heart of the show is them in New York City navigating New York City. So for them to go to Abu Dhabi just really doesn't make any sense.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And then for her to run into Aiden was just super cringe. I felt like they did that whole thing just to have Aiden in the trailer.
For sure. I will say that as far as a difficult acting moment, I felt like John Corbett handled it really well when he first runs into her. He's like, "Oh my gosh, like this is ridiculous." And, like he plays it really well. But then when they had their dinner,
Yeah.
I don't feel like Aiden would just be like, "You're sexy." Like,
no.
I don't know. I really felt for the actor because I was like, you were not dealt an easy hand. I think you played it as well as you could play it.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't make sense to me that Carrie would even go on the date to begin with. I feel like maybe she'd bring Miranda with her. Just I don't know. I just feel like she wouldn't do that, especially like make sure that she looks like extra nice, and I don't know, just her behavior doesn't really make sense to me.
I was trying to think about this too, and I was like, what would I do? And not that I'm like always the model of good behavior, but
yeah. So if one of your exes, you were in a foreign country, one of your exes said, "Hey, do you want to have dinner?"
I would 100%, just because there's something so cool about running into someone in a foreign country. I would 100% see them, but I would definitely have my friends there too. Yeah. They all knew him or her. Like in my case, if it was someone that I dated, whether or not it was just for a little bit or a long time, whether or not my friends had met them or not, I'd be like, this is so bonkers. Let's all hang out. It'll be such a fun night.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be like a date one-on-one. And it also wouldn't be where, I mean, Carrie looked hot as all get out and looked like she was on a mission to look.
Yeah, it was so weird. Well, and I feel like it's one thing, I guess, to meet with one of your exes. It's another thing to meet with somebody you were literally engaged to. I mean, I agree with Charlotte. I think that's playing with fire.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the way she reacts to Charlotte and Miranda when they get off the elevator after having the spa day, and she's so mean to them. I mean, Charlotte, when Carrie says to Charlotte, like, just because you're worried about your marriage, and you can see Charlotte just crumble, and Miranda handles that whole thing so well. Like, Miranda is definitely getting an A in the friend department in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they go to the Sioux, it's called, and they each get assigned a servant. And I thought that was really cringe too, that Carrie gets assigned this servant who is his wife's in India. He can't afford the plane flight to see her, but he's still like happy and pleasant to be around. And you think of how she was complaining because Big bought her, expensive television, and she has a bonus apartment. Like, I don't know. It just was not a great plot element, I don't think.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
He can't even always afford to visit her every 3 months. I thought that actor was really good. I thought he was also just like a cutie pie.
Yeah.
But the whole thing of, oh, I can't leave until you dismiss me. And like Carrie just, I don't know, the whole thing, it's so uncomfortable. That sort of status stuff makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah. He was more interesting than any of the characters in the movie.
He was like, can we watch a movie about this dude? Like, yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. They also confiscate Samantha's drugs for menopause at the airport. And I don't know, like, I have known a lot of women that have went through menopause. I have never seen anybody that was so out of control as Samantha is, like, literally just like sweating as if she was in a sauna. I know that all this stuff isn't pleasant, but I don't know, I just feel like it's way extreme.
Yeah, and I think that for her, as you were saying, because she's so focused on sex, now that she like is not really having a libido, she feels like, I think she's like, who am I without this?
Yeah. And so Carrie buys a pair of shoes for $20 and she can't believe it. She's shocked, and that she also leaves her passport there. And so that comes in later. And then they go to the karaoke club, and yeah, it was really cringe. I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar in the karaoke bar.
They really thought they were doing something there. They really, really did. And it was so awkward to think how they thought that was going to be a triumphant moment for women everywhere.
Yeah. And so they go on the camel ride, and it was just, you see that scene in the trailer of Charlotte getting a call from Harry in the middle of the desert. Then they also get made this basically like this feast, and they're just being like weighted on hand and foot. It was just uncomfortable.
After a costume change in the middle of the desert, because they needed a costume change. It was just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, and you have that scene with Carrie, like her servant is literally holding an umbrella over her head. I don't know. It was just kind of like,
and she's like, I'm gonna walk ahead a little bit on my own. Couldn't you have just said I'm going for a walk by myself, put on some sunblock, or I'll hold the umbrella myself?
Yeah. So this is when we get the scene between Miranda and Charlotte getting drinks and saying, how do women without help do it? When Charlotte says the first thing she thought of when Samantha said about Aaron was that, oh, I can't lose the nanny.
Yeah.
If Harry had an affair with her.
I thought that this scene was really well acted. It felt a little heavy-handed, but I thought that the heart and the spirit of it, I'm not a mom, but I can only imagine how difficult it is. And I think that it was a wonderful bonding moment for these two characters and such a true friendship moment that it's nice to see that wasn't superficial.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also find out Carrie doesn't have a wedding ring. And I forgot that if that was true in the last movie, that she didn't have a wedding ring. But then she goes out with Aiden, then they kiss. They do say it's the best Mahama Mara I've ever had. And if you haven't had Mahama Mara, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, you should definitely go have it. It is the best. Maybe when you come out for Sundance, we could go. There's this place called Maza in Salt Lake that has the best Mahamara I've ever had. So good.
Great.
It's like this red pepper dip that is just to die for.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait.
Good.
So good. I'll wait until then to have it because I've got my whole life so far, so I can wait another couple.
So good. I think you could put it on just about anything and it would be delicious.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah. And so then Carrie tells Big, and I mean, like I said, this movie is very like pro Big because I felt for him there.
Yeah, and I thought that it actually was a very realistic way for that character to receive the news and very well played.
Yeah.
When he's like, I'm at work, Carrie, like he's not gonna yell, but he takes it in. And I don't know, do you think that she should have told him?
Yes, I do. Because first of all, you don't want it to come out from somebody else because multiple people know that's
true.
If it was just between her and Aiden, then maybe no, but now multiple people know, and you would hate for him to find out from someone else. And also, I don't know, I just feel like it's the right thing to do.
I found it tricky that it's like the way she called him up in the middle of the night, though. I mean, it was the middle of the night for her.
Yeah, maybe wait until she got home to tell him.
Yeah. And I feel like she tells the whole story, and it's like, I don't know. There was just something about it that it was like, oh, is this more for you or more for Big?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then Samantha gets arrested, and she's just so annoying in this whole Abu Dhabi thing. That she's like throwing out condoms and saying, I have sex, and like it's just so disrespectful.
Yes. And I feel like they tried to combat the women not knowing anything about the culture with Cynthia Nixon's character, with Miranda being like, oh, this little fact, but that seems so heavy-handed and icky.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so weird that I could sort of go with the fact that because she doesn't have a job currently and she is someone who like might want to learn about things, I kind of was like, maybe I can go with this, but just the way it was done was like they were trying to balance out the fact that they were just icky.
And then the whole thing with the women in the burqas having these like designer clothes underneath, I don't know, it didn't feel real. It felt cringy.
It was so actively upsetting.
Yeah, it was bad. And so she finds her passport, and then they end up wearing the veils, which was also really cringy, disrespectful, to get out. And then Carrie gets a cab with her leg, which also was terrible.
Why did they do this?
Yeah,
it was only 2010. Like, this was like, I still think even then someone should have been like, I don't know, guys, does this seem a little weird to you?
Yeah. And then like it would have been cool if they had sort of learned that there is, for the women that choose to wear the veil, and that because sometimes it's forced upon women and then that's not positive, but when they choose to wear the veil, it can be an empowering moment for them. And I can't remember the name. I wish I knew. But in college, I watched a documentary by this really feminist woman that was unveiling, and she was expecting to be kind of like scandalized and, like this expose. And she ended up actually being like shocked that some of the most like talented and empowered women that she met had chosen by themselves to veil, and they had their religious reasons for doing it, and so it's not like it's inherently demeaning.
I think that's a really great point that I mean, especially with cultural perspectives that we don't understand, it's very easy for us to be like, I don't get that, or it is demeaning, or whatever the case may be. But we also need to like take a look at our own culture and maybe be like, well, what things do we do? Like, do I wear makeup and do my hair because I like it, or because I'm like trying to like have some sort of like standard notion of what beauty is in this patriarchal culture?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things that we can dismantle within our own culture and within ourselves before we go judging other cultures.
Yeah.
And I do understand if you want to, this sense of like wanting to empower other people, or especially other women, but we also have a lot of work to do in our own society.
And in this documentary, she's interviewing this woman who she thinks is like this really strong, empowered woman, wears modern clothes, and she shows this woman the picture of the woman in the veil, in the burqa, and the modern woman says, "Oh, I wish I had that much faith. I wish I like." She was envious of the woman who chose to veil. And so I appreciated that documentary at the time, because it was like, it's always refreshing when a documentarian and it reads true to the authenticity of the documentary when the director allows herself to be surprised. Then you don't feel like, oh, she set out to say this message and that's the message that she's, going to craft. That's usually documentaries that don't work. Whereas she didn't have some kind of resolution that she was seeking to defend. She was literally out there to learn, and the learning surprised her. And that's how it's a good documentary. And I really should find out what the name of that documentary is, because it's been since like 2000 since I saw it. But anyway, I always remember that she was so surprised that this modern woman was literally envious of the veiled woman. So I don't know, that kind of nuance is not something you get in this movie. That's for sure.
No, it's not.
No. And so then she gets home and Big gives her a ring, a black diamond, and makes her take a vow. And it was kind of nice when he said that he had made a vow and that he took that seriously, because I think sometimes we forget that marriage can seem in marriage can seem disposable, but there is really something really important about making a vow.
Yeah, and I think that Big, that's sort of his opportunity to show Carrie that like this is different for him than his other marriages. And
you see them in the apartment talking, watching Talk of the Town, which was kind of, because I love that movie, Talk of the Town. It's so funny. And you see the clip of them watching that movie together. And so that was a nice way to end a not great movie.
Yes, I mean, just the fact that we'd come to the end was just a blessing.
It's kind of crazy though now, Jax. We have now officially reviewed everything Sex and the City. Official.
Yes.
Because I think Carrie Diaries is more sort of fan fiction-y, but it'll be fun to talk about it nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, because we know that Aiden is back for And Just Like That.
Oh yeah. That's true.
We know that. Okay,
Yeah.
it's true. That does make me excited because I will say, even though I did not like this plot line at all in Sex and the City 2, he's so great. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens between them and Just Like That.
Yeah, it will be interesting. It'll be interesting. So, well, if you're listening, let us know what you think of Sex and the City 2. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments or on Twitter at City Girls Pod. And Jax, where can people find you?
At Jacqueline C. Tweets on Twitter and Jacqueline Collier on Instagram.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. And make sure you're following the podcast, the Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps us a lot. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. And we also have the Patreon group, which is such a great support, and the merch store. You can get City Girls Pod merch. So check that out. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.